Open your ears and lube up your butthole. It's time for the What Do We Call It podcast. Now, here's your host. It's Jmann. Welcome to the What Do We Call It podcast. I'm Jmann, and it's just me.
God damn it.
The topic today is the charging and arrest of now former Minneapolis Police Department officer Mohamed Noor. The name does not ring a bell. Last July, Officer Noor shot and killed Justine Damond. So originally, when this happened, this shooting, the news got out that an officer had shot an unarmed civilian. And I'll get into the circumstances of what specifically happened in the incident in a little bit here. People were understandably outraged. And the thing that seemed to really throw gas on the fire at the time wasn't just that this, here's another police shooting, here's another someone who ended up dead by the hand of a cop who was trigger happy, because that was the narrative that they were painting in the media to begin with. And it made sense just due to the fact of what transpired. But right away, Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman, people were like, you got to charge him with murder, you got to charge him with this, you got to hold him accountable. And he's like, I can't do it until I have the proper amount of information to do so. And what held that up for a long ass time, we're talking all the way from July until March of this year, Noor refused to be interviewed under the advisement of his legal counsel. So he repeatedly spurned the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension's attempts to ask him any questions about it. And this just further incensed Mike Freeman. So, the story is this. The day of the shooting, Damond called police about an alleged sexual assault of some sort that she thought she heard. It wasn't her as the victim. And they arrived, MPD, and she approached the vehicle. Officer Noor was sitting in the passenger seat, and Officer Matthew Harity was driving. And they heard a noise near the back of the car, and all of a sudden, I guess, Miss Damond popped up right there by the driver's side window. So they both pulled their guns. Harity did not fire. He reholstered his gun. Noor reached across the car in front of Harity's chest and pulled the trigger, shooting Damond in the abdomen, which she immediately grabbed the site of the wound and said something like, I'm dying, I'm going to die. And then, she fell over and EMS was called and they attempted to save her and they could not. So because of that, Tuesday, the 20th of March, 2018, he was formally charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. He then turned himself into authorities and was taken into custody. You can see his booking photo online on any story about this because that's the graphic that they're leading with, or else they're going to show a picture of Justine Damond, I think, sitting on a bench surrounded by flowers and shit on a sunny day. The usual happy, sappy victim photo, and Noor's just very stone-faced booking photo wearing an orange jumpsuit from Hennepin County Jail. Here's an interesting fact about this, rehashing old data from when the incident originally took place, is the shooting had Minnesota and Australia enthralled because Damond herself was an Aussie, and that fact welcomed new scrutiny of American gun laws by people in Australia, like her family and friends back home, and their government. They're just wondering, how does this happen? America's infamous for our gun deaths and our gun culture and police shootings. And here's another one, and it affected somebody from another country. And they kept plugging the fact that, Australia banned assault rifles and other high-powered rifles like that back in 1996. This was done in response to the Port Arthur massacre, in which 35 people were killed and 23 others injured by an assailant with high-powered rifles. So Australia is scrutinizing American gun culture, saying, look, we got rid of them and this stuff doesn't happen, which is kind of dumb because I get it. We're talking about guns, but this is like a police shooting issue, not a massacre on the streets or in a school thing like we're now famous for. This wasn't like they didn't have a Parkland shooting to compare it to at the time. But the fact of the matter is that Miss Damond was very highly regarded. She was a very good person. She was engaged to be married. And Noor was a Somali officer, and his record was pretty spick and span. He had 3 complaints against him, 1 resolved or closed and 2 pending. I don't know the nature of those, but he wasn't like a bad cop with a history of drawing down or brutality as far as I know, because I haven't researched those. But I figured they would have plugged that right away in the news if that was the case. The other officer involved was, scot-free because he reholstered his gun. But the BCA pulled the personnel files of both Harity and Noor to examine what their training they had, crisis training and de-escalation tactics and the usual full gamut of police training that they had since they had been employed as officers. So while he's not giving any information to the BCA, everyone's speculating what's going on or why he's not talking, which honestly was a self-preservation tactic if I'm to speculate, because if you think that you're going to be charged with manslaughter, obviously you're not going to go run and say, here's what I saw, here's what happened, here's why I did this, because the sooner you say that, the sooner that they can start formally moving forward with the process of charging you criminally, which they now have done. And Freeman has since said that the shooting, the incident itself falls outside the scope of the training. Noor's attorney argues otherwise, saying that he was in fear for his safety. He followed his training because they heard the sound, and when somebody popped up, he was afraid for Officer Harity and himself's safety, so he drew down. Now, the trigger-happy nature of it, that's unfortunate. I want to say that Justine Damond was kind of a victim of circumstance. It doesn't make this any less tragic. It doesn't mean she deserved to die, but I guess if the cops show up, you probably shouldn't slam your hand in the back of the car and then go jumping out in front of the driver's side window to say hello. I mean, just stand there with your arms readily visible, because they're going to be wondering what's going on. Furthermore now, Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman has stated that he viewed the behavior as an abuse of a police officer's right to use deadly force, because obviously he says Noor didn't follow his training because he was too trigger happy and should have at least waited before he pulled the trigger. And that's when you start looking at the actual charges themselves. 3rd-degree murder and 2nd-degree manslaughter. Now, the 3rd-degree murder charge accused Noor of committing a, quote, eminently dangerous act and showing a, quote, depraved mind, which it sounds like he was trying to kill her, like he knew what he was doing, if you're charging somebody with murder. And the speculation there is that they used the higher charge, hoping he'll cop a plea deal down to accept a manslaughter charge or something lesser. The 2nd-degree manslaughter charge cited culpable negligence, creating unreasonable risk. And I want to examine those words right there to give you some insight as to what they're thinking. Now, negligence is defined as a failure to take proper care in doing something. The next step up when we're speaking legally with charging somebody is culpable negligence. And that's recklessly acting without reasonable caution and putting another person at risk of injury or death. So they're saying is that basically you're trigger happy. You pulled the gun out too quick and you fired before you really knew what was going on. And I'm sure that he hasn't really admitted to anything. And I don't know exactly what new information they had to finally decide to bring forward the charges, because it took 8 fucking months for them to get this done, because people just kept saying, Attorney Freeman, when are you going to do something? What are you going to do? And the media jackals are just like, hey, when is this going to happen? And he's like, if I can do it, I'll do it, but I don't have the information, because he's refusing to talk to anybody. For example, it's manslaughter to cause the death of another person due to culpable negligence or reckless action or inaction, which places that person at an unreasonable and foreseeable risk of injury or death. And that's exactly, in my opinion, also, I agree with what they're stating when they charge him with this, that he acted recklessly. It's just like with Officer Yanez in the Philando Castile shooting. Suddenly Castile says, I've got a gun. He's like, don't reach for it. Next thing you know, Castile's got 5 bullet holes in him because Yanez got trigger happy. Now, it's a totally different scenario, and I'm trying to think to myself to picture what's going on. And I picture the driver, Officer Harity, trying to pull his gun, and that's on the seatbelt side, so that can't be easy because that's where the buckle for your seatbelt and any center console and your rocker switches to operate the lights and the siren typically are in most police cars. But because it's a two-man team, I'm thinking that the laptop computer terminal that they have in that squad car is in between them, creating less space. So imagine having to step on the floor quick and pull your gun out in the span of 2-3 seconds. And Noor gets that gun out, but I'm guessing what really happened was they heard that sound and then they both started to unholster, and that's when she popped up in front of the window, and then Noor got scared and fired the shot. Now, if I'm going to speculate what his defense is going to be, it's going to be solely based in that he was in fear for his safety. They didn't know what the sound was. But I would argue that, well, you could have put the car back in drive and just pulled forward a little bit, and then one of you gotten out of the vehicle. Created some space between the sound and the back of your squad car that you both described and your ability to get out and confront whatever's going on, because maybe somebody threw a rock. Maybe somebody's back there hitting it with a bat. You don't know. They both described a loud noise near the rear of the vehicle. I'm sure it scared the hell out of them because they were looking around to see what address they're going to or if anybody's outside waiting to talk to them, and that's what she was doing. Justine Damond was just standing out there waiting her turn to report what she had called to complain about. And it sucks. It sucks that when you go to meet the cops after you've called them, they're so damn jumpy. Now, I've had instances where I've called the cops on my neighbors, and I go out there to talk to the cop, and one cop's like, hey, how's it going? But immediately, a different cop behind him is like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, relax. I'm the one who called you. I live next door. And then I usually lift up my shirt and go, see my waistband? No threat of danger here, boys. She never got that chance. It sounds like this whole thing happened in the span of a minute. From the time that they pulled up, she slapped the back of the car, then she was shot. Which we don't have a very precise time frame on because, and this is a very important fact that has brought a lot of scrutiny onto Officers Noor and Harity, neither one of them had their body cams running. Now, they don't necessarily have to run their body cam all the time. It's just certain degrees of crime or certain types of crime, they flip that thing on. They hadn't even gotten out of the car, so I can see why they didn't have it on. I guess now I'm sure they're going to review in Minneapolis, the new chief, Arredondo, is going to possibly tweak the policy so they have to have it running far more often because Janae Harto, the now former chief of police, she said the crime was heinous, but I don't know if she flat out said you should have had the cameras on. The interesting thing there is that she was on vacation when this happened. So now former Minneapolis Mayor Betsy Hodges said that it was, an unreasonably long amount of time before Harto got back. But she was on vacation away from cell phone service, so she got back as soon as she could. I mean, she got home the next day, apparently because she didn't hop on a fucking plane 5 seconds after she heard what happened and magically teleport herself back to Minneapolis to address this. It was her fault for not running to the department right. And honestly, there was no love lost between Harto and Hodges. It's a completely separate issue, and I don't think that Janae should have had to step down. All right, this officer committed this act. She didn't encourage him to. She wasn't here, and honestly, why would the chief of police not be entitled to the occasional vacation? Seriously. So, Arredondo's now the chief, and he's addressed it by saying that Officer Noor, who had been on paid leave since the incident, is no longer with the department, which makes sense because he's being charged criminally. The fact that he's no longer a cop should in no way affect his defense. It's just a matter of them distancing themselves from him, the same way that Yanez was no longer a cop with St. Anthony PD after the shooting that happened with Castile. Now, there's tons of people that want him thrown to the wolves, saying, enough is enough, you need to hold these officers accountable. I agree with that. However, you have to realize that officer safety is the number one most important thing when you're a cop. And he was, as I'm sure he's going to articulate, scared of what's going on. I don't know if that justifies pulling your gun out. There were other avenues to get away from whatever perceived threat that he and Officer Harity faced. But to have that gun, to shoot in the car in front of your partner's chest, that had to scare Harity shitless. Oh my Christ. If you've ever been on the gun range and you're wearing ear protection, there's guns going off, that's loud. I can't imagine what it's like being inside of a car and you got your window down and then he just fires right in front of your fucking chest with the muzzle flash and the goddamn sound echoing off the inside of the squad because you got that glass wall that on either side of the cage separating those two in the back seat. So, I mean, the front's got to be almost like an echo chamber. So as I'm sure that their ears are ringing from the gunshot and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and she's standing there bleeding and holding the wound, this had to be just a horrific fucking thing to deal with. Aside from the fact that people are mad that a cop shot a civilian again, I want you to put yourself in his shoes, how fucking incredibly bad he must have felt immediately as he's disoriented and it's starting to register in his mind what happened. And he's just like, oh my God, I'm sure his life flashed before his eyes. I don't know if he's got a wife or kids. I don't know what's going on. He looks like a relatively young guy. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that unless you've been in that position to be afraid for your safety, all you can do is have the usual pitchforkian outrage about what transpired with an innocent, unarmed civilian being shot. So as for those people that want him thrown to the wolves, here's the odd angle. Immediately, the race card got played.
Oh my God, no way!
By black Americans when they heard about this, because Noor is a minority. Damond was white, so they figured that, oh, of course they're going to charge him because she was white. And her father and fiance and friends back home, they didn't care about the race angle because everyone's not so fucking color obsessed like we are overseas. In Australia, they just figured, well, this was negligence on his behalf. He murdered her. They threw out the word murder. I don't foresee it as murder because murder, in my mind, it would be premeditated and malicious. This was a response to an unexpected stimulus on his brain. So that's where the manslaughter thing is probably surely going to stick to some degree. No pun intended. I think he's pretty fucked in this one. But he may get off because, once again, fear for his safety. So back to the race angle. Him being charged now. There's a lot of relief and a lot of people are happy that this happened. But the latest development, it's just going to stir the racial privilege debates and reignite the perception of racial inequality in America, saying, well, of course you charged him for shooting a white woman. Look at all the cops that skated before, these white cops that shot black people. And I really hate that it always boils down to the race issue. I mean, this is not an issue of what color anyone was. So let's not politicize the color angle. Let's not bring that into this. It's about a cop who panicked and shot a woman. An unfortunate series of events. And I don't mean to trivialize the loss of life here, but I'm a firm and staunch believer in situational awareness, that you don't run up and slap your hand on a cop car. She could have been like, excuse me. I mean, there's any one of a number of other avenues she could have utilized to gain their attention. And I got to believe that if she had not done what she'd done, she'd still be here. So call me an asshole and cold-hearted and say I'm victim blaming. I'm not saying it's her fault she got shot, but it's her fault she did not do more to prevent herself from spooking these two guys and getting their attention in the wrong way. Kind of like it was, in my opinion, Castile's fault for not saying, officer, I'm going to put my hands up and I want to let you know that I am a licensed gun owner, that I have my conceal and carry permit. What would you like me to do with my hands? I'm going to keep them above my head. And obviously, how many people sit and think about that all the time? How many people have the reticence to know how they're going to react when the cops show up, worried that any little move they make is going to get them shot? Now, whenever I've been pulled over, and I've never even had a ticket, I mean, I've been given warnings, but I know I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to put my left hand on the window here, and here's my right hand, and I'll show them. I go, my wallet is in my pocket. I'm going to get that now. And I very slowly get it, and I pull it out because it's black. And I go, you see my wallet? Okay, that's all I'm reaching for is my wallet. I just tell them I'm reaching for my wallet now. But we've gotten to this new heightened state of alert in America where now everybody feels like the second they see the cops, they're like, oh boy, well, I could probably die right now. Which sucks because it's unfair to the cops, and it's unfortunate that we don't feel safe in our own neighborhoods and homes and cities to speak to the police without worry that we might accidentally become a statistic for moving too fast or saying the wrong thing. Here's how I would like this to pan out. I don't think that he should be charged with manslaughter. You could charge him with reckless discharge of a firearm or something lesser. I don't think he needs to go to prison for this. I do think that he should be sued civilly for this, and he should not be a cop again. Because I don't think anyone's going to touch him. No department's going to want to bring him on with all of this. Just like, Geronimo Yanez is probably never going to be a cop again. I probably could have Googled what is he doing now. But I don't know. Maybe he's working for like a private security firm or something. Someone will give him a job, but it's never going to have the social prestige or the level of importance that he had beforehand. That's what the future holds for Noor. If he does not go to prison, he's not going to be able to get a decent job. And he's damn sure not going to get accepted back in law enforcement. But one interesting wrinkle there is that a number of other cops have decided to not talk to the BCA or Mike Freeman's office. And there's alleged tampering by the police officers union to silence them, saying, stick up for your brother. I mean, if this was you, he'd have your back. And it makes perfect sense to protect your own because the whole thing's unfortunate. He didn't go, I'm sure he wasn't thinking all, Yosemite Sam, I'm going to fucking shoot somebody. What was that? Just wait to pull the trigger. So, as tragic as the whole thing is, I mean, he doesn't deserve to have his life ruined. No amount of money that he's found to owe the family of Justine Damond, if he's sued civilly, which he will be, obviously, is going to make up for the loss or her death. And it's just going to be a reminder to cops. That's what this whole thing is going to serve as. A reminder to police to fall back on your training. And they'll say, rely on your training, fall back on your training. To be cognizant of your surroundings and not be so quick to draw down. This is where police officer safety and American gun culture has begun to clash and tear apart the fibers of what was a very simple aspect of policing, that cops have guns and they will defend themselves, and they have those guns to serve and protect. Serve the public and protect their safety, protect their own safety. Now everyone's like, well, why are you shooting so many people? I mean, this is the battle that they're facing. And it's terrible. And I feel for my friends that are cops. I know multiple cops that work in big cities and a few locally. It's why I want no part of doing that. Nobody wants to be the next Geronimo Yanez or the next Mohamed Noor. No cop, I'm sure, wants to end up like Officer Gumby Mafukio there that shot Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. That guy, he got off and people wanted to kill him. I mean, he cannot be living comfortably. And no officer wants to be like the cop that shot Laquan McDonald in Chicago, which is a case I repeatedly bring up on the show as the prime example of how not to be a cop on the street when you encounter, quote, danger, as in a guy walking away from you, and then you shoot him fucking 15, 16 times. So wrapping this up here, Justine Damond did not need to die. I don't think Mohamed Noor needs to be made an example of. You could hold him responsible for firing the gun, and unfortunately manslaughter is used when there's an unintentional taking of life, which this totally was. Nothing that happens is going to make anybody happy, because his life is ruined and she is gone. So no matter which side you fall on, he should be charged and go to prison, or it's not his fault. Obviously it was tragic. It shouldn't have happened. Nobody wins. And unfortunately, this is not going to be the last time where we deal with a situation like this in America. And I'm sure it won't be the last time we'll even deal with it in Minnesota. Interact with the show on Twitter at What Do We Call It? That is at What Do We Call It? You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/What Do We Call It podcast show. For the What Do We Call It podcast, I'm Jmann. And that's the end.